There's a voice many of us live with every day. It comments, predicts, it criticizes, it warns. It replays old conversations over and over again at 2 a.m. It tells us what might go wrong, even though nothing has happened. And after a while, we stop noticing that voice. We think that voice is us. What if it isn't? What if anxiety is not who you are, but something your nervous system learned to do in order to protect you? Today I want to talk about that constant voice in your head, how to recognize it, how to separate from it, how to begin quieting without fighting yourself. Because healing anxiety is not about becoming silent inside, it's about learning which voice deserves your attention. Take a slow breath with me. It's not a perfect breath, just an honest one. Good. Now notice this. Most anxious thoughts arrive with urgency. Something's wrong, you forgot something. What if this happens? There's a fire, you should be doing more. You're behind, you're failing, you're not safe. Anxiety speaks fast. It speaks in absolutes. It rarely says maybe. It usually says definitely. And the longer we listen to it unquestioned, the more it becomes like background noise that we mistake for truth. Listen closely here. Thoughts are not facts. And not every thought deserves a seat at your table. One of the biggest turning points in healing anxiety is realizing that you are the observer of the voice rather than the voice itself. That shift changes things. Imagine sitting beside a busy highway and cars flying past constantly. And some are loud and aggressive and some are chaotic. But you are not every car. You're the one sitting safely on the side, watching them pass. Thoughts work the same way. The anxious mind generates mental traffic all day long, especially if your nervous system has learned to stay alert for danger. For many people, that constant inner commentary started long ago. Maybe you grew up needing to notice the mood of the house. Maybe you learned to anticipate conflict. Maybe your body experienced loss, fear, criticism, vulnerability, illness, trauma, or emotional overwhelm. The brain adapted. It said, if I stay alert, maybe I can stay safe. And eventually, hypervigilance becomes automatic. The voice becomes constant because your nervous system believes it has a job to do. That realization matters because it changes the way we respond to ourselves. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? We begin asking, what happened that taught my body that it had to stay on guard? That's a much kinder question, don't you think? Kindness or shame? Healing happens faster in kindness than in shame. And here's something else that might help. The anxious voice often sounds urgent, but your deeper self sounds calm. Not weak, not passive, calm. Your deeper wisdom does not usually scream. It says things like, one step at a time, you're okay right now. Pause, breathe. Anxiety pulls you into imaginary futures. Presence brings you back to the room that you're actually standing in. That's why grounding matters so much. Not because grounding magically erases anxiety, but because it interrupts the spiral long enough for your nervous system to remember. And it remembers, I'm here right now. And right this minute, I'm okay. One simple exercise I love is this. When the anxious voice starts spiraling, pause and ask, is this thing that I'm thinking about happening right there, right now, right this second? Or is this my mind trying to predict the future or replay the past? That question alone can soften the nervous system. Another powerful tool is naming the voice without becoming it. Instead of, I'm falling apart, try, my anxious mind is telling me I'm falling apart. You feel the difference. That tiny language shift creates a difference between you and the fear. And where that difference is, there's space, and that space is where healing begins. Because once you can observe the voice, you are no longer having to obey it. It's not an automatic process anymore. Another important point, quieting the anxious voice does not mean suppressing emotions. Some people try to silence anxiety by pushing everything down. But buried emotions do not disappear. They wait. Healing is not emotional numbness. Healing is safety. Healing is creating enough inner safety that your body no longer needs to scream to get your attention. Sometimes that anxious voice is actually exhaustion or grief, loneliness, or overstimulation. You may have been running on survival mode for far too long. So instead of attacking yourself, try becoming curious. What does my body need right now? Maybe it needs rest or hydration, less scrolling. Maybe it needs some sunlight or a little movement. Maybe it needs someone safe to talk to. Maybe it simply needs a moment without pressure. Your nervous system is always listening to how you treat yourself, and every gentle response teaches it something new. Let's talk about one of the hardest things to get through: silence. Sometimes when people begin healing anxiety, they notice moments where the mind becomes quieter. And oddly enough, that can feel really uncomfortable because chaos has become the familiar. Many anxious people are so used to mental noise that peace feels unfamiliar at first, and maybe a little dangerous. But what you might be feeling as unfamiliar or dangerous simply means your nervous system is learning a new pattern. A quieter mind is not emptiness. It is space. Space to think clearly. Space to feel joy again. Space to hear your intuition. Space to notice beauty. Space to actually live instead of constantly preparing for disaster. And no, you're not going to do this perfectly, or odds are you're not going to do this perfectly. The voice may soon return. That doesn't mean you failed. Healing is not becoming a person who never has an anxious thought, because anxious thoughts happen to most of us. Healing is becoming someone who no longer believes every anxious thought is true. That's freedom. Little by little, your relationship with that voice changes. You stop fearing it so much. You stop wrestling with it constantly. You stop feeding it every ounce of your attention. And eventually it loses volume. Not because you forced it into silence, but because your nervous system finally learned, I don't have to stay in survival mode all the time. So today, if your voice and your mind feel loud, if the inner commentary feels relentless, if you're exhausted from overthinking everything, I want you to remember this. Your brain learned protection. Your body learned vigilance. Your nervous system adapted. And nervous systems can heal. It's not likely to happen overnight, but I do believe in miracles. But eventually, through safety and awareness and compassion and repetition, one breath at a time, one grounded moment at a time, one gentle interruption of the spiral at a time. And maybe tonight, before you fall asleep, instead of arguing with that anxious voice, you simply notice it. Like weather passing through the sky, like a thunderstorm outside. You don't have to chase every cloud. You don't have to solve every fear. You do not have to attend to every thought that knocks at your door. You can breathe. You can soften. You can come back to this moment. And in this moment, you're already beginning to heal.